Walter White's first major test as a criminal came when he and Jesse captured Crazy 8. With Emilio dead from the phosphine gas explosion, Crazy 8 was the only remaining witness. Logically, Walt knew he had to kill him. But emotionally, he wasn't ready. For hours, he debated. He brought Crazy 8 food, had long conversations with him, and even convinced himself that maybe they could come to an agreement. Eventually, he decided to set him free. But just before unlocking the bike lock that held Crazy 8 prisoner, Walt noticed a broken plate. Crazy 8 had secretly grabbed a shard and planned to stab him. Walt realized then, sparing Crazy 8 would get him killed. In tears, he strangled Crazy 8 to death, marking his first real step into the criminal world. The partner he couldn't kill. There were countless moments where Walt could have killed Jesse Pinkman. In fact, by the later seasons, Jesse had given him every reason to do so. He had betrayed him to Gus, tried to poison him, and eventually became a threat to Walt's empire. But despite everything, Walt never pulled the trigger on Jesse. In season 3, after Jesse plotted to kill Walt for letting Jane die, Walt could have easily killed him. But instead, he manipulated him back into working together. In season 4, when Jesse became Gus's right-hand man, Walt still didn't kill him. He tried to win him back instead. In season 5, Jesse turned against Walt, exposing him to the DEA. Instead of killing Jesse, Walt handed him over to the neo-Nazis, a decision that haunted him until his final moments. Even in the finale, when Jesse had a chance to kill him, Walt simply tossed him a gun and let him choose. Jesse refused, and in that moment, Walt finally freed him. Jesse was the one person Walt never truly wanted to kill. No matter how much Walt claimed to be Heisenberg, Jesse was always the one person he couldn't bring himself to kill. Even in his final moments, as he lay dying in the meth lab, he gave Jesse what he always wanted: freedom, the death he let happen. One of Walt's most infamous decisions was not killing Jane Margolis, but instead letting her die. This wasn't a case of Walt being too weak or too hesitant. This was a case of pure calculation. Jane had become a major threat. She manipulated Jesse, blackmailed Walt, and was leading Jesse further into heroin addiction. When Walt broke into their apartment to steal Jesse's drug money, he witnessed Jane overdosing on heroin. For a moment, he almost saved her. His hand twitched, as if he might roll her onto her side. But then, he stopped. He watched as Jane choked on her own vomit, tears in his eyes, knowing that this was the best way to keep Jesse under his control. This was one of the coldest moments in the series. Walt refused to kill Jane directly, but in many ways, his inaction was more brutal than murder. The man he regretted killing. For most of Breaking Bad, Walt and Mike had an uneasy alliance. Walter White had plenty of opportunities to kill Mike Ehrmantraut throughout Breaking Bad, but he never did. Not because he lacked the means. Mike was one of the few people who openly disrespected Walt, and as Heisenberg's ego grew, that became dangerous. But Mike was also useful, and Walt knew it. For most of their relationship, Walt kept Mike alive because he needed him. Mike was smart, experienced, and had connections that Walt didn't. Even when their partnership became strained, Walt never sought to kill him. But in season 5, episode 7, that changed. During a heated argument, Walt impulsively shot Mike, only to immediately regret it. "I just realized Lydia has the names," he muttered, as Mike staggered away to die alone. Mike never begged for his life, and Walt never planned to kill him. It just happened. If Walt had been able to control his temper, if he had truly refused to kill Mike, things might have ended differently. But at that moment, Walt's ego overpowered his logic, proving that even when he didn't want to kill, his darkness always found a way. The kill that wasn't his to make. Hank Schrader had been hunting Heisenberg for years, and when he finally uncovered the truth, it seemed inevitable that Walt would kill him. But here's the thing, Walter White never wanted Hank dead. Even when Jack Welker's gang had him on his knees, Walt begged for his life. He offered the neo-Nazis all of his drug money, $80 million, just to spare Hank. But Hank knew it was pointless. "You're the smartest guy I ever met, and you're too stupid to see he made up his mind 10 minutes ago," Hank told Walt before Jack executed him. This was one of the only times Walter White showed emotions. He could kill drug dealers, cartel members, and even innocent people if they stood in his way. But when it came to Hank, he was powerless. A poisoned goodbye. Lydia was one of Walt's last remaining enemies. She worked with Jack Welker's gang, tried to have Walt killed, and was still running the blue meth operation. But Walt didn't kill Lydia with a bullet. Instead, he poisoned her with ricin, slipping it into her stevia packet at their final meeting. This was another case where Walt refused to kill directly, but ensured death just the same. The friends he spared. Unlike Jesse, Badger, and Skinny Pete, were never major players in the meth business. They were low-level dealers, often clueless, and more like comic relief than actual threats. Walt had plenty of opportunities to eliminate them, especially when they got arrested or made mistakes, but he never did. Perhaps because they reminded him of Jesse, or perhaps because they were simply too small to matter. In the end, they were among the few people who survived Heisenberg's reign. Walter White's story is a tragedy, not just because of the lives he took, but because of the times he refused to kill. Every moment of mercy had consequences. Letting Crazy 8 live almost got him killed. Watching Jane die destroyed Jesse. Refusing to kill Jesse led to his own downfall. Begging for Hank's life proved that his power was an illusion. If Walt had been more ruthless, if he had followed through on some of the kills he hesitated on, maybe things would have ended differently. Maybe his empire would have lasted longer. But then again, without these choices, he wouldn't have been Walter White anymore. He wasn't a cold-blooded killer like Gus Fring or Jack Welker. He killed out of necessity, out of pride, out of anger. Walter White never wanted to see himself as a true monster. He never enjoyed killing the way some of his enemies did, but he also never fully accepted responsibility for the people who died because of his choices. When he refused to kill directly, he was often just fooling himself, because even when he didn't pull the trigger, he was still the one orchestrating the deaths. At the end of Breaking Bad, Walter White was not remembered as a hero nor as a tragic figure. He was simply a man who had made his choices, for better or worse. Some people lived because of those choices. Others died. But in the end, it was never about morality. It was always about Walter White deciding who lived and who died, playing God in a world that ultimately proved he was just another pawn in the game. And so, we're left with the ultimate question. Did Walter White ever truly have control? Or was he always just a man pretending to be Heisenberg?